Hello, hello. I'm so excited to be here today on this beautiful Thursday with my fourth guest on discovering your brilliance. So today I have the pleasure of speaking with Lisa Dare. I met her through an organization that we are both a part of, and she so graciously offered to be on the podcast. So, a little bit about Lisa. She is a multifaceted, certified, and accredited executive coach, management consultant, leadership practitioner, and facilitator with expertise in change management, organizational effectiveness, diversity, equity and inclusion, and strategic planning. She is a principal and CEO of Lisa Dare and Associates, a coaching and managing consulting and facilitation firm. So I love to add in Lisa. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Vanessa.
And thank you so much for being here. So, bios are so fun, but I always love to hear people's journeys from their own mouths. So, I'd love to hear your journey into coaching.
Oh, yeah, it was an interesting journey because I actually started my career as a clinical pharmacist. So I actually I was actually a hospital pharmacist in an acute care hospital for a number of years. And the story that I usually tell is that I get bored and then I look for something else. So went from that into the pharmaceutical industry. And actually it was there that I actually discovered coaching through a conversation with my manager, because at the time I was looking to just grow my career, move to the next level of representative where I was. And I said to my manager, I said, what do I need to do? Do I go and get another degree? What should I do? And he said, well, you know what? At the time, our organization had undergone reconfiguration of the performance evaluation process. And one of the new competencies that was introduced was coaching. And there was
Oh,
a
wow.
description of coaching of self, coaching of others. And he said, why don't you just go take a coaching course? And I'm like, okay. So I signed up at the university, went to a workshop, and discovered through the day that I was doing a lot of the things that this instructor was talking about. And then I realized, like, she's getting paid for that. So I at the end of the course, I said, by the way, I said, I want to do what you do. I said, how do I do that? And at the time that she had started coaching, it was sort of, she's kind of got grandfathered in because she'd been a social worker by training. And she said, but there's a coach training program that's now available at the university. She said, you could sign up for that. And I'm like, okay. So she gave me a couple of names of people that had gone through the program with this particular provider. And it happened to be CTI, which is the Coaches
Oh,
Training
wow.
Institute, the Coactive Training Institute now. But I spoke to a couple of people. It seemed to be interesting. And I noticed that if I just signed up for the whole package, it was cheaper. So I just said, okay, sign me up. And that was my introduction to coaching. So I did that while I was still working.
Oh, wow. How long have you been coaching?
I have been coaching. So I did my training in 2005, so close to 20 years. Hard to believe.
Wow. Yeah. And at what point did you decide to start your own practice?
Well, it was sort of thrust upon me, shall we say, because when I completed all my training, I did my certification as well. I At the same time, my company, the last pharmaceutical company I worked for, was actually going through a downsizing, and it was like, I think, one of those stories of serendipity, because I was called into a meeting with one of the sales managers. And I remember very distinctly saying to another colleague, I said to him, I said, do you think I'm going to get fired? And he's like, no, no, don't be stupid. Like, he said, your results are great. You're a really good rep. He said, no, no, no. He said, I'm sure it's something else. And I said, okay. And then it turned out I got a package, but the
Oh,
same
wow.
day that I got my package, I went home and I got my certification results in the mail, and I had passed my certification exams.
Wow. So that is universally perfect. So you got home from being let go, and then we're like, wait, I have this other thing that I can do.
Exactly. Yes, it was very, very serendipitous, I would say.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I am reading this book, Hidden Potential, and they were talking in so many of the books that I've read. It's like your journey is never what you think it's going to be. You kind of really have to be open to life surprising you and being curious about when one door closes, another door opens. And it's really interesting just to see where you'll end up because it's not ever perfectly planned how we want it to be.
Yes, and I think that that can definitely, if anybody's familiar with Myers-Briggs, right? If you're a J, right, it probably just rocks your little world if that happens because they're the ones that are like super, right, like planned and organized. And I'm a P, so maybe that's what allowed me to kind of just organically continue to just evolve and shift and adapt through life each time something happened, right? Because as you said, there's
Yeah.
lots of curveballs, right, that get thrown at us.
Yeah. Which leads me to a question that I love to ask. How do you define success personally? And how has like that definition evolved throughout your life as you've gone on this discovery journey?
Well, it's a great question. I would say that, success when I was younger, particularly when I got into the pharmaceutical industry, was very much targeted towards career milestones. So, knowing that, and when I was in the pharmaceutical industry, I worked for several companies and they were all big pharma. So there was definitely opportunities to advance, opportunities to move, right, if I wanted to. And so I think then success was very much defined by, oh, where could I go? Like what role could I get or where could I move to? And all of that. And there was always a part of me that wasn't super materialistic, but very goal and achievement oriented. And I think now, over time, success for me is about really being able to do work that I love. And in fact, that it doesn't really become work because it just becomes something that it's like being a craftsperson and really honing your craft and loving your craft. Um, and that it's more about some of the more less materialistic things like, you're talking about, just having, dealing with being at home and dealing with all the things that happen at home, right? That can interrupt us, right? Same thing,
Yeah.
with me, right? I'm a caregiver. So the fact that I have work and a schedule that allows me to care for and be with the people that matter to me or to pursue other interests and still be able to generate income, I think is like a beautiful thing. And to me, that's success because I don't have to worry about conforming to that 8 to 4 or 9 to 5 schedule. I have that ability to flex, be autonomous and independent, and to make choices that for me are going to be fulfilling and meaningful, and to be connected to and meet some really fascinating people. So all of those, I would say, are factors for me that define success now, as opposed to when I was younger.
Yeah, I love that. And it sounds like your alignment with your values and your purpose are tied closely to that, right? Knowing what's important to you. Well, it wasn't the materialistic side, but having those goals that you could reach and the flexibility now really were important as well. I, through my practice, learned about how values are so important, but we don't often like sit down and go like, what do I value? What's important to me? What do I want my life to look like? And just doing that work as a coach with your clients can be life changing once you're like, hey, what's the most important thing? Um, so tell me more about the strategies that you have um, found to be most effective when you're helping people in self-discovery, your clients that you're helping to be successful at achieving a goal?
So I think first it starts with really understanding the audience. So, of course, every client that comes to us has their own unique personality, right? And of course, in a lot of the work that I do, there's usually some assessment tool. But I find that the assessment tools are really more, I think, for the benefit of the individual, in the sense that it just gives them a greater sense of awareness, because everyone's at a different place around their own level of awareness, self-discovery, right? The words around it. So for me, it's really about, as I said, first and foremost, understanding my audience. Where are they coming from? What are they about? What are their needs? Really connecting with and adapting and flexing to who they are. And I find from there, usually what I'm doing is, yes, the values piece is quite important, right? That's kind of our, I'd almost say like that's the compass, right? It's like kind of that's the compass and the foundation from which we build from. And then the assessment tools usually help us to uncover maybe some kind of a gap or a learning opportunity that we want to develop. And then from there, we start to have some discussion around, how we bring those two things together, right? What really matters to them? Where's the gap? What's a goal that's going to be meaningful and going to have, high impact for them? And then we start to craft that, and then we have some conversations around how are they going to do that. And
Yeah.
in my own approach, Vanessa, is that I'm very much a reader. I sort of carry that from my days as a pharmacist, being very focused on lifelong learning. And I know from the assessments that I've done, I'm a learner. So that for me is huge. So I'm often offering my clients resources, or sharing with them a piece of research, and that's kind of what we do, right? And then as they work through their plan, then we're doing some work to sort of monitor, get feedback. How's it going? Do we need to adjust? All of those things are part of the process when I'm working with
Yeah.
some.
I love that. From your clients and your experience that you've had over the years, can you share a breakthrough moment that you had where you witnessed like a huge aha or transformative moment for a client that has always stuck with you?
Hmm. Well, I'm thinking, it's a couple of stories. So I'm thinking about one. A number of years ago, I was involved in a fairly major leadership development program within an oil and gas company locally where I live. And one of the leaders that I was working with was a fellow in IT, and he'd had over like 25 years of experience. And his 360 actually indicated some gaps for him, and he was transitioning from really somebody that had always been very good at producing results to somebody that needed to now have an impact on his people. And so
Mm,
one of the pieces of feedback that he received was that people thought he was very overbearing, right? Because he would cut people off in meetings. And, he actually felt quite bad about this, right? Because he said, well, I don't mean to do that. Like people saying, well, he talks over me, all this stuff. And so we talked about just what would be some of the things would help him to listen better, right? Something that we all take for granted, right? But it's
yeah.
very difficult to do well. And he devised for himself some simple strategies that he would employ before meetings. So he would always say to himself, like he would remind himself to, first of all, shut up and listen. Like he would actually tell himself three things. And then he would say, notice what, other people, how other people are impacting. Um, and then he would, just pause, right? So, and within the weeks, he said people were like just unsolicited coming up to him and saying, I noticed that you're just like, you've changed and you're giving space for us to talk, right? And it really changed him, right? Because it really
Yeah.
changed him, because he really was very intentional about, right, slowing down, giving space to people, right, and giving himself some internal messages that would just help him to be more prepared in meetings. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so that's like
What a
one.
great example. Yeah, especially with such immediate feedback for him. I think it's interesting. Again, I was just talking to another coach, and when you transitioned into coaching, it's always hard to explain what you do. And I think that what you just said was a beautiful example of that. Some mirroring back and feedback in a way that most people never get. But with the support of somebody who's just there to be in your corner, you can make pretty significant changes. And then it has a ripple effect through not only you, but the people you're managing. And that can be life changing for a whole organization, which is pretty
Mhm.
fascinating.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then it's also, I think, incredibly rewarding when you see also the transformation that can happen when you dig into some personal growth opportunities as well, right? Because I thinking of a client that I'm working with right now, a woman who is sort of midlife in the sense that she's, I can say, I think she's in her mid 40s, but she's always struggled. She was a caregiver from a very early age. Grew up in a single parent family, was the oldest, always had to be responsible, and she has an employer that's incredibly supportive of her. So without necessarily all the formal training, she is the controller of this company in a very male dominated industry, manufacturing. Um, and it's just been amazing to see her level of confidence grow from somebody who was very anxious, who wasn't really sure that she was capable, to somebody now who is much more self assured. And it's wonderful because I just had a call with her yesterday, and she said, yeah, she said, now, she said, if I come across something that I feel like I don't really know, she said, instead of like getting really anxious, she said, I put it off to the side. And she said, and then all of a sudden, she said, I get an email that explains how to do this, or I get information on like how to deal with this issue. And she said, and it's all good. So it's just been so amazing to see her level of confidence grow, and to see where she could go, with all of it.
Wow.
It's just so
Wow.
exciting.
That is fascinating. And what a gift you're giving to the clients that you work with. I have found it really interesting in my coaching practice that oftentimes when I'm facing something for myself, it'll come up in a coaching conversation. And obviously, abide by the ICF rules. So I'm not talking or sharing my thing, but it'll be like, oh my goodness, this is wild that this is coming up in this conversation. And the exact thing is what you're dealing with. Have you ever experienced anything like that?
Oh, all the time. Right? It's just like, I think, what's fascinating about that, Vanessa, is this whole piece around collective consciousness and energy, right? Um, absolutely, right? Because in our conversation yesterday with my client, she said to me, she said, I've struggled for so long. And she said, they're celebrating, she and her husband are celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary. They got married
Oh,
really young.
wow.
And so she said, but she said, I just realized, she said, I haven't been living my life.
Oh,
And it was
wow.
just so fascinating to me because, yes, I had a very similar conversation with somebody else on a podcast because we were talking about grief, and loss, and how we can choose to translate that experience into so many different things, right? Some people get really stuck in it, right? Some people
Yeah.
use it as a tool to leverage something else. And interestingly enough, I was thinking about my own experience and my life, and, am I, right, going big? Am I not, right? How am I living my life? So I was just sharing in our group, right, in our mastermind group, that I'm actually making plans to go to Barcelona in the fall to go see an artist that I really love, right? Because I don't know if he's going to come to the US or Canada. And
How awesome.
yeah, big deal, right? Because it's like, yes,
Yeah.
I'm going to do this. But then I thought to myself, well, isn't this what life is all about, right? Having meaningful and just powerful experiences, right? And living life, right? Whatever that means to us. So, yes, that gets mirrored all the time.
I love that. I love that. And I think that's such a good reminder too when you are working. I mean, I think this work is such a gift. I love working with people and having them have those moments, but having that reflection back is such great. That's a gift too, right? To say to yourself, wait a minute, I got to live life. Because so often life flies by. And to your point, like different experiences can weigh you down. But if you, in the work that we're both doing, it's like you can have those things reflected back to you. So you're like, wait, how am I doing this? What am I doing with this? And then make a change because we all know how to make those changes. I love that so much. Um, so tell me a little bit about like, are you currently taking on clients? What does your practice look like? And what would you say to somebody listening to say like, I'm your girl if you're going through X, Y, and Z?
Yeah, so yes, absolutely, still taking clients. I would say that kind of my sweet spot, Vanessa, is in particular, the focus for me is really around leadership. And leadership, not necessarily in that professional realm, because I think that's often what people associate leadership with, but it's also about personal leadership, right? Is somebody, somebody on the feeling like they're on that edge of something big, right? Or they're ready for that next step, but they don't know how to get there, right? So, for example, Vanessa, I worked with a group that are nurses with the College of Nurses, and one of the participants came forward and reached out to me because where she would ultimately like to go is to actually become the national nursing director. I can't remember the actual title, but in Canada, we actually have somebody who's like in that national position. And that's where she'd ultimately like to go. And so she um, was exploring and looking for support around how would she get there, right? So, but I think also as well, personal leadership could also be around managing challenging life situations, right? In my own life, I alluded a little bit to this. I'm a caregiver for my mom, right? And as a result of that, sometimes I'm having to make difficult decisions, right? Based on what I think is best for her because I am advocating for her. And I think there are many people in positions like that, right? Or in situations where they might have to sort of think about how do I exercise personal leadership, right? Manage also somebody who is very strategic, and I love to just be that thought partner for people to bubble up ideas because I love creativity. So those are just some of the different ways in which I can support people and kind of build around that very sort of foundational piece of leadership.
Yeah, being the leader in your own life because so many times you take the back seat, right? So it sounds like you're somebody and you have such great calming presence. I appreciate you dealing with all of my ups and downs today. There's been some technical difficulties for those behind the scenes that don't know this, but you have been so gracious and you have such a wonderful presence. So I'm sure you are able to support your clients in such a beautiful way in the space that you hold for them.
Well, and I think, you know what, Vanessa, it's all about this is the metaphor for life, right? As you mentioned earlier, we can have the best of best laid plans. And there's something about holding things lightly with that plan, right? It's like, here's where I'd like it to go, right? Here's how I would
Yeah.
like it to happen, right? But life sometimes has different plans. And I think that's the one
Yeah.
thing I've learned too, right? Is that I think back to what you said something earlier is that I think what's kind of cool about coaching is that our coaching and how we show up is also reflective of our own life journey. I don't know if you've noticed that, right? But it's kind of like what who comes to me, right? What
Yeah.
in the coaching that happens because it is very much reflective of maybe something we've just experienced, where we've been, what we're going through, and how we are supporting and working with others through that process, right?
Yeah.
We are always evolving, right?
Oh,
Everything
yes.
evolves, right? So,
Yes, 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 yes. I so similar to you always say that I'm like a lifelong learner as well. So thank you so much. I have one last question before we end out our session together. What advice would you give to somebody who's currently embarking on this journey of self-discovery, trying to figure out what their passion, purpose, or fulfillment in life might be?
you know what, Vanessa, what I would say is don't focus on it too hard. And what I mean by that is that I think that we live in a society and we are given messages that, oh, you must figure it out, right? And if you don't have it figured out, like, there's something wrong with you, right? You've got to work harder. Um, I know from the reading and the learning that I've done, creativity comes when we actually let go, and we don't focus on it really hard, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's also recognizing that there's no one right answer, right? I love the word, I love the term multi-potentialite because, um,
Oh,
yes, because I always thought I was a little bit weird because I thought, oh, like, okay, like people would ask me, like, what's your niche, right? And it's like, I don't know, because I just find people fascinating, right? And they could be
yeah.
fascinating for a number of reasons. So there's this term multi-potentialite, which speaks to the fact that we can have multiple interests, multiple areas of expertise that we could speak to. Um, and I would encourage people to really enjoy that journey, right? Don't feel like you have to have everything figured out, because I think sometimes when we feel like we do, life hands us something else, right? And then we go, oh
Oh,
my
yeah.
gosh, I want some of that, right? And so
Yeah.
so
I love
it's
that.
just trusting that you can be all those things and more, right? There is not
Ah,
necessarily one right answer, right?
that is so beautiful. That is so beautiful. You just made me think too in this book that I'm reading, they did a survey of schools and who like across the world is the most successful. And Finland rose to the top every time. And their philosophy is along the lines of like every student, we believe that every student has potential. And our job as educators is to figure out how to pull that potential out of every student because everybody has it. Where in the United States, it's more like if you get the best grades, you're the best. But it's like, no, everybody has a unique gift. Everybody has their own thing, and we just need to nurture whatever that is for each person. And I love what you said because the path to success is the winding road and everybody's looks different, and it's a fun thing to discover and continue to learn as you go to say, "Whoa, what else can I do?" Multi Tell me that word again. I love that word that you said.
Multi-potentialite. Yeah.
Multi-potentialite. I love that.
Yeah,
I love
there's
that
a
so much.
multi-potentialite. And I think that really, yeah, I love that. I think I saw something similar to what you were talking about with Finland and how different countries will take a different approach to education, right? Like a round peg, what do they say? A square peg into a round hole. It's actually how do we um, work with, right, those unique features that everybody has, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And how do we leverage that, right? Because and not judge it or label it as good or bad. It's just like, okay, that's interesting, right? That's
Yeah.
different, unique. Didn't think of it that way, right? So
Yeah, I love it. This has been such a great conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your story and advice. I have really enjoyed talking to you. Do you have any parting words for our listeners today?
you know what? I think that, the parting word that I would say, Vanessa, what has really been sort of, I guess, the two things that have really allowed me to sort of evolve on my journey, even when things were uncertain, was just an unflinching trust, and leaning into my creativity,
I
right?
love that.
When all else fails, know that you are a creative being and trust that the universe has your back and wants the best for you. You just gotta sometimes just lean into it, and
Yeah.
just trust that.
Wow, I feel like that's a really powerful thing to end on. Thank you, Lisa. That was wonderful. It was so great learning more about you and speaking with you today.
Yeah,
Thank
well, that was
you.
great, and thank you for hosting, Vanessa. It was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you so much.